Hey fam, welcome to Conversations on Blessing the Block. This is our fourth discussion in ARC's six-part summer series, looking at the directives to the exile community found in Jeremiah chapter 29, verses 4 through 9. We truly hope that these conversations are serving to better inform and educate us as a local church on the current and historical landscape of local issues we seek to address as we bless the block through our Pray, Study, Act teams. My name is Hannah Baker, and I have the honor of serving Anacostia River Church as Deaconess of Community Development. Tonight's discussion, Marry and Have Children, is focused on family formation and support efforts here in Southeast DC. Thanks to everyone tuning in live on Facebook and YouTube. This is a two-way conversation, so don't be shy about using the chat feature on either platform to share your claps, your snaps, and your amens. You can start by dropping the hashtag Marry and Have Kids into the chat right now. This will enter you into win tonight's drawing of a signed copy of Berry Farm Hillsdale in Anacostia, a historic African American community by Alcini Amos. You can also use the chat to ask questions of our panelists. Questions from the chat will be taken towards the end of the discussion. Before I turn the program over to tonight's moderator, I want to encourage everyone to stay tuned until the end of the discussion, where I'll be back to share some family formation and stability resources, as well as announce the winner of tonight's drawing. I'm so grateful for our sister Joya Matthews for moderating tonight's discussion. Joya is Associate Director of the Mayor's Office of Women's Policy and Initiatives here in Washington, D.C., a proud Ward 8 resident, a newlywed married to her best friend Thomas, and a women's ministry coordinator here at our church. I couldn't think of anyone I would rather have moderate tonight's session. Fam, please show our sister Joya some love as she joins us. Hey,
Hi.
Joya.
Good evening. Hi, Hannah. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for doing this, sis.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the discussion. So again, thank you, Hannah, for having me and for that warm introduction. And I have to pause and thank you and the team for just prayerfully putting this series together. I hope that the viewers have been as blessed by it as I have each week and have learned a lot more about the community each week as we've been doing these. So thank you again for your service and your dedication to Southeast DC in this way. So welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us this evening. As Hannah mentioned, my name is Joya Matthews, and I'm really excited to moderate this discussion tonight. Again, I'm a proud Ward 8 resident. I truly believe that some of the best people on the planet are from and live in Southeast DC. So it's an honor to lead this discussion this evening. Before we begin, I want to reiterate that it will be an interactive conversation. We welcome your participation and your feedback. So again, don't be shy, join in and talk back with us. And also feel free to drop additional questions into the chat box, and we'll do our best to get to them before the end of the evening. So to kick us off, I'd like to introduce Pastor Babatunde Olushesi. He is a loving husband and father and an elder here at Anacostia River Church. And he has served faithfully in this capacity for over a year now. And he's here to set the stage for us and just share the the biblical context for tonight's discussion and to just share why this topic is so important. So without further ado, please help me welcome Pastor Babatunde.
Thank you so much, Sister Joya. It's a great evening with expectation about what we have to say or discuss regarding our family issues. On behalf of the pastors, I welcome everyone. Family, you're welcome. Our guests, you're welcome also. And so let's get into this. You know, at Anacostia River Church, we believe God has planted us here east of the river in Anacostia, Southeast DC, and then sent us out into the community, not only to proclaim and spread the good news of salvation through Jesus Christ, but to also bless the community, which is now, that is the community, our place of influence. And that is why we're having these conversations with those God had already situated in our community to lead and fight for the welfare of the people. As a Christ-following church, we look into the Bible, which is the Word of God, and see that the instructions God gave his people when he sent them into exile because of their disobedience are quite instructive for us and speak to us today in our own situation and condition. So, what are these instructions from God to his people then that still speak to us today? We already had conversations about two of them found in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 5. They are: one, to build houses and live in them; two, to plant gardens and eat their produce. The third of these commandments is our conversation tonight. Jeremiah 29, verse 6. And it says, take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. In other words, God is saying, marry, have children, produce and reproduce, raise families, thrive and flourish, have success. We believe at Anacostia River Church that God is saying the same thing to us today, to go out and bless our community with these instructions. But you ask, why would God give a charge this specific to marry and have children and raise families? It is because without families, it is nearly impossible to build houses and live in them, or to plant gardens and eat their produce. Marriage, from God's perspective, is the foundation or the rock on which communities and societies are formed and raised. After all, it is God who gave us the idea of marrying and having children and multiplying in the first place. It is not just to marry and raise families, though. It is to do so responsibly. It is to have strong and healthy marriages and raise strong and healthy families. This is where we come in, to bless our community by helping to see that all hands are on deck on this. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, neighbors, all coming together in intentional love for the community and care enough to bring up useful, productive, law-abiding, God-fearing, God-centered sons and daughters in the community. So that we can grow from where we are into greater heights in the very near future. And in this way, we can truly thrive and flourish in our community. It is our desire to see less and less fractured families within the community, but more and more viable and strong families where children recognize that their parents have authority and responsibility over them. And parents realize that they are stewards of their children and that they need to manage them well. So as we go into our neighborhoods, carrying this message of hope and assurance from God and the gospel of Jesus Christ in practical terms to share and proclaim, we pray that what may have already fractured is bound together, and we begin to build again a culture that is built on true substance of life. Let me lead us in prayer to start this off tonight. Our Father in heaven, with all gratitude, we come to you tonight to rub minds together in our neighborhood where you have placed us, how your blessings can spread throughout the community. And so I pray that the panelists who are discussing tonight marriage and families, strong family formations, so that you will be with them, and that whatever we do, or that we speak today, that tonight will not be the end of it, but that tonight will be the beginning of it. And may you take the glory, Father. In Christ Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Sister Joya, back to you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Babatunde, for that introduction. As he mentioned, this series was birthed from the sermon series entitled Bless the Block, where we look at what we believe is God's blueprint to building a strong community. Today, we're discussing family formation and God's guidance to marry and have children. Now, when thinking of building up a community, marriage and family likely aren't among the first thoughts. You'd probably think of our previous week's topics first, like securing housing and food resources, and understandably so. We hope, however, that tonight's conversation is instrumental in helping us to view healthy, sound families as integral parts of thriving communities. So how do we know that this is important? Well, folks much smarter than me have spent years researching the impact of families and have even gathered a snapshot of where we are today. So let me share a few facts with you from the Child Trends study, authored in part by one of our panelists, Dr. Chrishana Lloyd. From 1987 to 2017, only 37% of Black women have ever been married. Currently, 64% of Black children live in single-parent families. Among children living in grandparents' homes and being cared for primarily by a grandparent with no parents involved, more than 1/4 are Black. Fertility rates for Black women have declined over the last 10 years. Half of Black female workers are mothers. Black men and women are overrepresented in jobs that have non-standard hours of employment. 34% of Black children from birth to age 5 live in households with incomes below the federal poverty line. The District of Columbia had the highest share of Black children in the U.S. in both 2010 and 2019. And let's look at this community a little closer and examine the 20020 zip code specifically. In this community, 97% of this population is African American. 28% of residents in this zip code are under 18. 62% of adults here have never been married, and only 5% of adults in 20020 are married with their spouse present. So we know that the causes of many of these statistics are rooted in racism and oppressive policies and institutions. And though the breakdown of the family didn't happen on its own, we know that the solution will not happen on its own either. If this research doesn't show us anything else, It proves that we need strategy and we need intentionality if we're going to rebuild and strengthen the family structure in African American communities. So to help us tackle this challenge, we have 3 dynamic panelists who are committed to this work. So first, joining us, we have Dr. Chrishana Lloyd. Hi, Chrishana. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Good evening, everybody.
Dr. Lloyd is a nationally recognized expert on the study and implementation of interventions to support early childhood professionals in environments such as home-based childcare, community-based, and Head Start settings. She has more than 20 years of experience in the social science and education fields and considerable experience with applied place-based research and technical assistance. She has served as the primary investigator, or PI, and or lead implementation researcher on both federal and privately funded research projects. Currently, Dr. Lloyd co-leads the study of coaching practices in early care and education settings, also known as SCOPE, which is designed to move the early care and education field toward consensus on the core features of coaching and how they are defined. She is also the co-PI for the South Ward Promise Neighborhood Evaluation. Thank you again for being with us, Dr. Lloyd. Up next, we have Matt Miller. Hello, Matt. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Matt Miller serves as the community activator for Martha's Table. He has been dedicated to its mission and core values for over 8 years. First as an arts instructor in Martha's Table's Scholars Program, and then joining the community development team 3 years ago. Much of Matt's work as an arts instructor was providing therapeutic cultural arts enrichment. Currently, Matt's primary focus as the community activator is building partnerships with the community, organizational and agency leaders, and establishing connectedness and long-term community relationships. Last but not least, we have Cynthia Moreland. Good evening, Cynthia. Thank you for being with us. Cynthia is the former executive director of several organizations committed to serving vulnerable populations of children. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Antioch College. And throughout her career, she has developed, implemented, and measured programs which provide affordable housing for single parents, inspired adolescent girls to prevent multi-generational cycles of teen pregnancy, and most recently developed programs to assist aging out of foster care to use education as the catalyst for change. Her role at DC 127 allows her to focus on minimizing the negative systemic effects of poverty and isolation from opportunity for God's most precious gift, his children. So thank you all for being with us this evening, and let's jump right into the questions. This first question is for everyone. If we could just start with you all telling us a little bit more about the work of your organizations and how it impacts children and families. Dr. Lloyd, we can start with you.
Well, I work for an organization called Child Friends. We are located in Bethesda, Maryland. I actually work remotely, so I'm in New Jersey right now, but I'm a DMV native originally, so nice to be back home, so to speak. Child Friends has about 200 staff, varied backgrounds: psychology, sociology, social work, statistics, public policy, education, public health, a range of social science experts. And our mission is really to conduct research and evaluation on behalf of children in America. And a lot of our work focuses on vulnerable communities, low-income communities in particular, and really thinking about those linkages between research and public policy and also practice. And so we do a lot of work with states across the country. We do a lot of work with the federal government, and then also with nonprofit agencies that serve families and children. And really, with a long-term goal of using research, using evaluation to make actionable recommendations, whether they be on the policy or practice side, and to disseminate that information large, kind of by and large, so that organizations and policymakers and other researchers can use, our analyses and our data and our findings to drive their work.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lloyd. Cynthia, we can go to you next.
Absolutely. Well, first, I'd like to thank the entire Anacostia River family for having us. And we certainly appreciate your partnership with us. We've been an outreach for Anacostia River Church for several years, certainly predates my engagement. So I'm just very grateful to be here. And Matt and Dr. Lloyd, very nice to learn about your work and your respective roles. Of course, I know child trends very well. I use your statistics to make my case when I'm making a philanthropic ask. DC 127, and I also am a native Washingtonian from Ward 5, recently came back, relocated from Atlanta, so it is so wonderful to be here. DC 127 was founded in 2012 when there was a shortage of foster and adoptive homes in the district. And the city agency, Child and Family Services, reached out to the church and said, we need help. And the church responded, the church organized, and it's a beautiful bridge that we've built between church and state and shown where the faith community can really show up and be helpful to a problem that the government was not set up to solve. The work of caring for vulnerable children is very intimate. It requires children coming into your home and opening your hearts to them. And so there's special training and tenderness that you need for that, and especially when children have been traumatized. So throughout our 10-year, next year, 2022 will be our 10th year anniversary. We've consistently worked to recruit additional foster families, to advocate for foster and adoptive families. But the more we worked, the more we started working upstream and said, how can we prevent a family from being displaced and having a placement disruption? So we started providing wraparound services specifically to residents in wards 5, 7, and 8 in the district, but will serve anyone. But we try and go where families are most vulnerable, where those statistics that you pulled out threaten family stability. We provide a volunteer for each family. Since the pandemic, we've started for the first time in our history providing direct financial support. We are instituting that and leaving it as a critical service. And we help families who are vulnerable to having their children displaced work on a goal. That goal is usually around affordable housing, food insecurity, unemployment, education, and also language barriers. So our charge is based off of the book of James, the first verse and the first chapter, 27th verse, to care for widows and children and orphans. We don't call children orphans anymore, but we really want to care for children in foster care, to let them know that they are loved, they are important, and they're significant. And we couldn't do that without our church partners and without the volunteers who open up their homes and their hearts to foster and adopt.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. Matt, we'll circle to you now.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here as well. I too am a native Washingtonian. I was born in Ward 7 and then raised in just about every other ward you can think of. Been with Martha's Table for 8 years, as you said before in the bio. We're really happy to be a part of the Ward 8 community, as we've just moved to Ward 8 about 3 years ago. And what we do at Martha's Table is, well, we have several different components, several different departments and programs within Martha's Table. But our overall mission is to support strong children, strong families, and strong communities through increasing the access to quality education, health and wellness, and also family resources. With education, we support our children and young adults with quality learning experiences that will eventually help them to thrive from cradle to career, basically. And we're committed to making sure that every child is enrolled in our education program, that there will be strong by 8. So strong by 8 is what we call it. So that's the age at which the children will transition from learning to read to reading to learn and beyond. So, and we offer nationally accredited and early childhood education, after school enrichment programs, and also college and career readiness training that promotes success. And through our health and wellness component, we know that food and nutrition is just been at the heart and soul of Martha's Table since we first opened over 40 years ago. So our daily Martha's Table markets, our community markets, uh, um, uh, and our network of monthly joyful food markets, along with our McKenna's wagon, which is the truck that you sometimes would see going out and feeding people that are in need of food. We do that to aim to increase access to healthy food and support children and their families as well, and try to making healthy choices. So with our joyful food markets, we go out and we educate people on nutrition, and just healthy choices with how they can prepare their food. And then with our family engagement program, we are committed to making sure that parents and caregivers and guardians are both supported and supportive. So our family engagement program generally will help to strengthen the homeschool relationships for all of our students, and will connect the caregivers and parents to all of the critical resources that we have available, in addition to partnerships that we've established outside of MT as well. So we can go on and on about all of the things that we do, but those are pretty much the main components of Martha's Table and our functions.
Wonderful. Thank you, man. And thank you all again for being with us. It's clear that you all are the right bunch to help us through this conversation tonight. So thank you again. So Dr. Lloyd, as we began with a lot of your research from the Child Trend Study, if you could just share a little bit more of, from your research, tell us how marriage impacts child development and just the strength and healthiness of children. You're muted.
Am I muted?
Okay, we can hear you now.
That's weird. Yeah, it's not a very straightforward story. It's fairly complicated, I think. And I would say, most of the work around marriage, most of the research around marriage really looks, kind of the most consistent messaging is really around family structure, right? And so what we're seeing, I think, in the research is that this rise, for example, that you mentioned, the statistics that you mentioned from the recent report that was out, those kind of that rise, particularly in the Black community around unmarried births and children being born to single parent households, there are two reasons for that. And one is, people are having children and they're not married. I will also say increasingly people are cohabitating. So if they're not married, they actually tend to be in the same household. So that's one thing to note. And I think the other piece of that is the divorce rates, right, are going up. And so we're, as a community, more likely to be in that bucket of, kind of the not married and cohabitating more so than divorce, because we're, getting married at lower rates. And so part of I think the question is really, and the debate in the field is really around, is it marriage per se that makes the difference? Or is it just, kind of the structure of the family and the characteristics of the people that are getting married, coupled with the benefits of having two incomes? And those questions have not really been answered yet. So I think, people are fairly tentative about, the benefits of, I would say, the institution of marriage per se, although we, actually know that the outcomes for children tend to be better around education, around employment, around, markers of delinquency, around teen pregnancy, like those types of issues, right? They tend to happen at a lower rate from children who are in married households. And then the question is that because of, the marriage itself, or is it because of, the characteristics of the people and the financial benefits? So for example, some would argue that marriage is not making people happier or healthier or more financially secure, but instead people who are happy, who are healthy, who are financially secure are the ones who are more likely to get married. And, it's kind of a chicken or an egg question. But, we definitely do know there's some benefits there. The question is just around the process and what that actually means. Though there's some work that we've been doing at Child Trends now. I'm actually not working on that with an organization called Brookings. And it's called the Social Genome Project. And so it's kind of a long-term longitudinal look at marriage and outcomes for children. And so far, I mean, this project is not done. But what that study is showing us is that those kind of family processes are really fairly important for outcomes for children. And so parenting in particular seems to be rising to the fore as being increasingly important, and something, a skill that actually can be taught, whether people are married, or not married, that's something that you can work on together. There was a couple of big studies that happened kind of in the early 2000s, both of which I actually worked on. One was Building Strong Families, and one was Supporting Healthy Marriages, looking at Building Strong Families was unmarried couples who had children, and then Supporting Healthy Marriages were married couples that had children, and really looking at the impact of marriage education programs and couple education programs, and whether or not, having those supportive relationships, the idea or the premise was that if you had, these supportive relationships within the married couple unit, or the couple unit, that you'd see better outcomes for children. It's really been interesting because we're here, I don't know, I guess maybe 15 years out from that work, maybe a little bit less. And the findings are really, kind of mixed around that. And so from a policy point of view, I think what the analysis between those projects and the one that's going on now with Brookings is really suggesting is that, it's that higher income from being married that's really important, and the engaged parenting, the ability to, be less stressed out, right? Because you have someone there to help you carry that burden, and you can go to the parent teacher conferences, and you can help with homework, and, you have the necessary nutrition and the housing and all of those other things, those benefits, excuse me, are what seem to be beneficial and what seems to be driving more of the positive outcomes for children. So, when we think about kind of the areas where this really matters, one of the biggies, in, I would say, more vulnerable communities is Black males. And so we're looking at the higher, incarceration rates, for example, and them coming home and not having jobs, the skills, the capabilities, right, to be viewed as marriageable. If you look at the research, like a lot of the research, qualitative research in this area, young women will say, no, I'm not interested in that guy, right? Because he doesn't have a job, and he's not able to take care of family, but they're still having children, right? They're having children, but they don't want to get married. And so the research will also show, though, if they are getting married, that the financial benefits aren't really there. And in fact, the stressors are so high that people end up getting divorced and not staying together. So from my point of view, if I had to put some money down and really make a bet on where we wanted to, kind of concentrate our efforts, and our policy responses, it's really around kind of creation of an atmosphere in more vulnerable communities that provides one, kind of getting rid of these crazy sentences that are happening with our young men, and really working in that area, and thinking about how to support people in terms of, child support arrears, education, training. Those are the types of things that when they're out of the way, those young men are then viewed as more marriageable, and then tend to actually get married, right, and be more interested and in the prospects. So I think we've got to stem the tide early, and create opportunities and pathways for our young men to really be able to excel and grow before getting kind of caught up in these systems. And that's a very complicated thing to do, as we all know, with the people on this panel and the backgrounds that folks have. But that's where I'd put, kind of my dollars.
Thank you. And that makes perfect sense. And I think something that stands out that you mentioned is that, the importance of parenting, but also that it can be taught. So it's not the end of the world if you may not have had that example of quality parenting. You might not have grown up in that way, but there is support out there for you. And what people may not know is that Martha's Table is a part of that support that exists. And Matt, that Martha's Table is widely known for its food distribution and its services that provides fresh groceries for families across all 8 wards. But the organization does much, much more than that. And you mentioned a lot of it in your introduction. But could you tell us more about Martha's Table's programming that encourages that parent readiness that Dr. Lloyd was just talking about, and that encourages family success?
Yeah. So yeah, we are a lot. We do a lot more than provide food and groceries and early child care. This is a wonderful organization because as we're now, in the Ward 8 community, we have our eyes and our ears open, and with our new strategic planning, we are giving the community an opportunity to lead in many ways. So we're here learning of the different needs and the different issues and concerns of and from the community that we serve, from our neighbors. And we're constantly just being creative in terms of developing programming projects based on the need. Education is in everything that we do, so it's not just with early child care and after school programming, but with everything that we do, there's always that area for education and educating, and so that strategic planning, it's just a great opportunity to allow the community to be a part of its own development, and that's something that Martha's Table, that's something that we definitely support just through that whole rollout. We have we have amazing programs where we're preparing our parents for the work world. So we're developing workforce development programs, parent and child readiness. And at the same time, we are making sure that we're forging relationships with the communities and our neighbors and the people that we serve so that we can continue to be true and trusted neighbors. All of that gives our parents and our community just nothing but the best positive experience. And so whether they're coming in for diapers or if they're coming in to sign up for, we have a program for our Fathers in Touch program. They're always going to walk away with an incredible experience, whether they're volunteers. Even our volunteers, they're able to come in and just have access to the most incredible experience. A lot of volunteers will come in with their parents, and then their parents will end up volunteering as well. And so, with all that, it just breeds it breeds elevation and development with our families, and it's definitely something that promotes success in many areas of the family structure. So that's something that we're very proud of, and we just continue to grow and develop.
Thank you. That's wonderful. And just from my own curiosity, what types of things would parents, particularly fathers, get at some of these Fathers in Touch sessions, or what kind of parenting assistance would they get?
Well, the Fathers in Touch program is it's like a combination of I would say social development. It's like a support group. There's workforce development in there. There's a combination of things because we know that we are serving a lot of dads out there that may or may not have had a hard time. And so we're here to support these fathers. Oftentimes, dads just get slapped on the wrist, and so we want to provide that supportive group. And that program is growing. We've partnered with an organization called the Capital Youth Empowerment Program, and they're a fatherhood initiative program. In addition to the mayor's office, they have an office of fathers, dads, and something like that.
Fathers, men, and boys. Yeah.
That's right. And so one of our former colleagues, who he's now the director of that program, Jason Wallace, he's doing an incredible job. And so he's come back and maintained the partnerships with us, and it's just been great. We just had a Father's Day celebration event a few weeks ago, the day before Father's Day, and it was really big, really nice, and just a great day for dads to show up with their children and to experience different activities. It was just a great day. So we want to continue to honor dads and mothers too, and celebrate that, because what that would do is just that would just leave you with the best feeling. And again, when we're talking about those experiences, we just want to allow people to be able to experience those highlights. Those things will eventually, promote just a better sense of self, a better sense of value as well. And so that's what that's about.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I love also that you all's strategy is kind of as you said, allowing the community to be a part of its own development. And I think that DC 127 is a good model of that. Cynthia, with DC 127 is a very unique organization in that it supports families who want to foster and welcome children into their home. But you all also work really hard to keep families together, with essentially reducing the need for foster care. So could you just share a little bit more about kind of the duality of your organization's work in that way? You are muted.
Yeah. Framing the conversation around the institution of marriage, when marriages are healthy and when they work, it provides the balance to give us all the foundation that we need. Unfortunately, regardless of income, many of us don't get that. And so our emotional intelligence is off by the time we reach adulthood. And if we don't ever get healing from that, we simply pass that lacking and that longing on to our children as well. We're serving a growing population of teen parents, and we're finding with our teen parents in foster care who are attempting to be reunited with their biological parent, we have to take a 2-generation approach. 98% of the families we serve are single parents. We do serve some single grandfathers and some single fathers, but primarily we work with single women. And the thing that I think is our unique approach is we decrease feelings of isolation, of feeling like I'm in this alone. When I was interviewing for this position, I met one of the families that's served by DC 127. And I said, well, what is it that the organization does for you that's so impactful? And she shared the story of needing surgery. And she had 2 young children. And she said, I needed to go to the hospital. It was an emergency surgery. And if she didn't have her volunteers that we had recruited through a church partner, her children would have gone into foster care because she had to leave by ambulance. And she had no one to take care of her children in her absence. So marriage provides community. It provides relationship. And, the Bible teaches us that, family is the genesis of society. It's our first institution, and we've broken that. And so as a result, we have so many broken generations. And without a concerted effort, it's not going to heal on its own, because the divorce rate for people who are married with resources is extremely high. Over half of marriages end in divorce, no matter what your economic background. But think about the stressors in your community of trying to figure out parenting, to figure out life alone. It leaves parents feeling overwhelmed, and without enough resources, the parents we serve love their children as much as I love my 3 daughters. The difference is they don't always have the economic support, the community, the emotional connections to empower them and to help them think through difficult situations. So they make short-term decisions that aren't in their children's best interest, and they need support when that happens over and over again. So we really try and build wraparound services around our families. And again, we ask our parents, how can we serve you? What are the goals you want to work on? We provide grocery assistance. We provide psychological counseling sessions. We'll provide rental assistance. And again, we're working with our families on a goal around stable housing, food, employment, language barriers, and we have a host of partners who help us to fill in those gaps. But we try and be the neighbor, the friend, the partner who's not in your life, so that our parents are not journeying in isolation.
That's wonderful. And I thank you for sharing that story. And I think I love that DC 127 just as a whole highlights just the similarities. There's nothing any different between the parents and the families that you serve and any other families. It's just oftentimes those split moments, or those abnormal occurrences that could make the difference between whether a mom loses her children, unnecessarily. It could be a situation like the one you shared with the surgery, or it could be, just short of enough dinner, for one night or 2 nights. And that the wraparound services that you all provide really means the world to these families, and makes all the difference. So we really appreciate the work of your organization. The next question is for everyone. We know that the breakdown of the family, as Cynthia, you were just mentioning, the breakdown of that family structure, particularly in African American communities, it again did not happen on its own. It did not happen naturally. So can we discuss just what some of the historical factors are that have contributed to the disruption of the family?
Well, I think we've all touched on it. One of the points Dr. Lloyd made is the disproportionate number of African American men that are imprisoned poses a major difficulty when they re-enter society. If the bulk of African Americans are living below the poverty line, and if you're living in subsidized housing, you can't re-enter society and come back to subsidized housing. So you're automatically ostracized and disconnected from your family when you're trying to re-enter. We have an economic system that is very much tied to our racial inequity, and the disproportionate number of African Americans living below the poverty line, who are the result of a broken family or broken home, or who've spent time in foster care. These things are as natural as growing up and going to college was for me. It is what everyone does. And if no one tells you anything different, how are you inspired to see that? And so that's why we believe in an intentional effort, and we do workshops on healthy relationships so that individuals can set boundaries around what works for them so that the relationship will be a healthy one. Because it's not just marriage, it's a good marriage. It's a marriage that nurtures the family. It's the biblically prescribed marriage where the man loves his wife like Christ loves the church. That's a beautiful thing. And so many of the women we serve, if they were loved in that way, they are phenomenal women. They energize me more than I energize them. But if they were loved and partnered with in that way, they would be motivated to accomplish so much more than they already do against the odds. So again, there are systematic barriers that are in place that have resulted in the difficult statistics we all work against. So there has to be systematic approaches to breaking down those barriers. It's not going to, DC 127 is not going to solve it. I wish we could, but we're not, because the issue is bigger than us, and our economic system is set up so that the poor will get poorer and the rich will get richer.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything that Cynthia just said. I think that in addition to that, and I have this conversation, I feel like I have this conversation all the time. But I think that there is something, and I'm sure it's systemic, but I think there is something seriously challenged with the overall conditioning of our African American males. Our conditioning seems to be tainted. I think that what once was considered as tradition, that's changed, and I think that whether it's for whatever reason, if it's systemic or what, but I think that the African American male seems to have challenges with our African American women being in a position of power. We see that our Black women are growing in economic status, and instead of us really celebrating that, we have challenges with that. I've seen it. I've had conversations with people, and I think it's because it's no longer it's not a part of that traditional norm that what we're used to. I remember growing up where it was like nothing to have, the dad go to work and the mom is the housewife and she cooks and cleans all day, and then dad comes home and you just thinking that was just the way that it was supposed to be. And then, of course, throughout the times, things have changed, and there's been these economic shifts, and we all just got to keep up. So, and our women have fought to go to work. They fought to be able to contribute, and that's actually something that we should be able to celebrate. But instead, that somehow poses a threat, and what you have is a lot of us, we just can't accept that. It's like this thing of inferiority or something like that, and so that becomes a big challenge with our Black men, and then I guess because of that, we just can't seem to get on board. We can't seem to be a part of the union, the building process. As we all know that relationships and marriages it's a union. It's about building. And so it's been a challenge, and I've seen good men go through these challenges and really struggle with that. And I think that's a discussion that we need to have. That's something that we definitely need to work on and I speak for the Black men out there. We really have to work on that, because we have to celebrate our women that are out here doing this, picking it up, carrying us, we have to celebrate that. And we have to get on board with it, and we have to support it. And I think that if we continue to be psychologically affected by that, then we're never going to be able to connect. We're never going to be able to establish these unions that are standing right there in front of us. Now, I know that there's conditioning on both ends, but I can only speak for the men. I'll let you guys speak for for the women, but I think that's definitely something that has hindered us in terms of progression and moving forward.
I jump in to say, just from my point of view, if you're, really thinking about these, kind of systemic issues, institutional issues, one thing that's pretty striking is when you look at income and you think about history, we have been, as a people, really fairly new to the middle class, right? Because of systemic racism, institutionalized racism, we were really kind of left out of the opportunities to be employed in jobs that we had livable wages and could maintain families. Housing was a big issue, the redlining, the inability to be in particular neighborhoods, to have access to good education because you were in neighborhoods that, did not have infrastructure and resources in them to support good schools. And so, these are all issues that are not mutually exclusive. They kind of go together and they get compounded. And to me, that's a big part of the challenge. And so taking it back to income, if you look at the Black middle class, and if you look at the Black middle class in quintiles, what I'll call them, so there's 4 kind of layers to that middle class. We're in the low part of those quintiles. So if you take, kind of 4 or 5 is the highest, we're at 1 and 2. And so we're in a very precarious situation, even when we're middle class. It takes one thing, a pandemic, a family illness, something, and you're not in the middle class anymore, right? And so to me, that was intentional. It was intentional. It was policies, procedures, practices enacted by our government, both federal and local governments, and the purpose was served. And so here we are, and we're not very far out. I have this wonderful graphic that I'm working on right now that looks at, kind of how long we've been since 1619 enslaved up through Jim Crow. And if the timeline is, from here to here, that period is here. And so you really just have this minuscule piece of time where we've been, and I'm going to say it in quotes, free. Because we've still got all of these other systems that are beating down on us as a people, whether it's criminal justice, back to the housing, the poor nutrition, like all of these things are still impacting us at a disproportionate rate. And COVID has just sent it way over the top. And so it's really concerning and worrisome, because income really is the driver for a lot of this. You talked about, Black men feeling, uncomfortable with Black women who are making strides. And we know, we're going to college at higher rates and we're getting, degrees, even surpassing the white population. But you know what? We're still here in those quintiles, right? So we're earning less, money, even though we have higher degrees and higher levels of education. And it's not just about the money, it's about the wealth. And so those families who were able to buy homes and pay for their children's college education and pass down resources, we're new to that. We haven't had that for a really long time. So it's the income and the wealth that's, I think a big piece of this when we, bringing it back to marriageability, what that means, what you're able to contribute psychologically, physically, it's all intertwined. And I think we really need to be very strategic and intentional about putting pressure on our senators, our elected congresspeople, our presidents, the people, because it's the policies that really make the difference, in my opinion. We can talk a lot about what we need to do, and there's work to be done. Psychologically, we've been through a lot of trauma. There's just stuff that we know we have to work on. But from a policy side, there's a whole heck of a lot that can be done on that level too, that can help remediate some of this situation, that can help us to build wealth. And when you're comfortable financially, it makes the psychological so much easier, right? And that's what we see even with, the child development and marriage and what's happening with children, right? It's that income that frees you up to be able to pay attention and to be attentive and to be loving and to not be interfacing with child welfare, right? And so I think there's a lot of work to be done and getting us registered to vote and paying attention to who's making these policies and what they are, because the local is really so much more important sometimes than the federal when you think particularly around incarceration issues and things like that. So I'm talking a lot and I'm going to be quiet.
Oh.
That's where I'm at.
with everything that you've said, Dr. Lloyd and Matt. And in the spirit of owning and being self-aware, I think we need to do better as individuals. I think, there's a moral deficit. There's a lot of bad behavior in relationships in the Black community that's celebrated. It's put to a beat and we bop our heads to it, and it's not cool. And we're paying the price for it because we're desensitizing adolescents, and we're sanctioning behavior by rapping about it and doing certain dances, and so we've really decimated. And Black people are proud people. We're dignified people, and what I see us portraying, and I love the disruptive generation, and I love all of that, the way they think, but let's still be self-respecting, and let's require something of a man. Don't make it so easy.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother session.
It is the fundamental part of marriage. If we are having a conversation about marriage, you have to have accountability for your behavior and what you allow someone to do.
Right.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I thank you all for sharing just different aspects of how we are, how we're at the place that we are today, and showing that there's so much work to be done. And it makes the work of each of your organizations magnified even, and it's so important. Cynthia, your agency, DC 127, emphasizes church mobilization for family support. And you mentioned earlier, God's recipe for healthy marriages is one that we all should follow. And it's very true, and we believe that as well. I'm curious as to why your organization chooses faith-based organizations to target for outreach and mobilization.
Well, again, I believe, and it wasn't my idea, I think it's a great one, but it is such intimate work that you do need people who will bring this into your home. There are many people who volunteer, but you may not ever cross their doorstep. And so when you're asking someone to love a child as their own, you need intimate relationship with them. And our pastors preach about the importance of remembering children in foster care, children that need homes, and adoption. And these are usually thoughts that are already on people's hearts and minds. And so having the opportunity to serve through their church, I'm a Christian. I can read the Bible, I can study the Bible, but if I'm not living like a Christian, I'm not really fulfilling my faith. So we know that Christians look for ways to serve, and we feel like serving children at risk and those in foster care and those who need adoption is a great way to live out Christian faith. We are an ecumenical organization. We are open to anyone can serve and be connected with us. It's just that we are a volunteer-led organization. We get volunteers from community partners, but we work with over 30 churches in the district, as well as the Mayor's Office of Religious Affairs, to connect people with service opportunities to care for children and vulnerable families.
Thank you for that. So we're gonna shift over to a couple questions in the chat in just a moment. But before we do, Dr. Lloyd, could you share how different factors like the overrepresentation of Black parents in jobs with non-standard hours and just other economic factors impact children and families?
Sure. I mean, that is a huge one. I mean, we definitely are overrepresented in the essential worker category, right? And whether it be, helping professions, and again, thinking historically, kind of what we were able to do, domestic work as Black women and more laboring type work as Black men. And we've continued in those types of jobs. And so they do require non-standard hours. And it's really a conundrum when you think about children. Black women are in the workforce in incredibly high numbers and working many times, not just one job. And those women who are working are also in their childbearing years. And so what does that mean for childcare, right? What are you doing? Where's the high quality childcare? Where's the affordable childcare? And that's a challenge because we know from the research too that high quality childcare is what really can give you a leg up as a parent. If you're working, you don't want your child in substandard care, right? You want your child in an environment where they're loved, where they're appreciated, but also where they're cognitively stimulated and learning and putting them on that trajectory for advancement. And so to me, that's one of the biggies that I think we need to really be thinking about and tackling is with our it still baffles me to this day how we got this title as, kind of welfare queens, or that Black folks are lazy, because that is so not the case, if you look at our labor market participation. But childcare is a big deficit there. And there's a couple of reports that have been done by Urban Institute recently around the childcare deserts, looking at Washington, D.C. in particular, and looking at Ward 8 in particular. And there really is a lack of high quality, affordable childcare. And that's what you need to be able to work. And so what happens is people then make a decision not to work. And that has lasting implications, not just for that time frame that you're not working, but around that income and wealth building that I was talking about before. So big implications in terms of child development and those non-standard hours.
Oh, for sure. And that's a great segue. Matt, Martha's Table is the champion for Head Start and early Head Start programs. Why, as Dr. Lloyd just kind of highlighted and outlined for us, but you can share a little bit more about why programs like that are so important for children.
Sure. Very important because as we talked about before, our parents are no longer in these traditional roles. And so the dynamic, the family structure, the dynamic is shifting. You got both parents going to work. So that there has to be, number one, a space and a place for children to go where, while their parents are out working, but also an extension of their learning. As we know, children definitely learn at home, or at least they should learn at home, as their parents are the first teachers. But a place where they can go, they can grow, they can develop their cognitive and social, emotional skills, with the hopes of just growing to become outstanding people, and so, the Head Start programs, they give our children, our youth, the opportunity to grow in all of those facets of early childhood development, so that they can be prepared. Like we said, strong by 8. So that's sort of like the motto. So hopefully, Head Start programs will continue to thrive. Quality Head Start programs will continue to thrive. Our children will continue to, go to these programs and just develop and just become the outstanding people that we see them as. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you for that. And just before we shift over to the panel questions, there's such a negative view of Black fathers in mainstream media. They're often labeled deadbeat dads, and they're often characterized by absenteeism, but research tends to counter these views and often shows that Black fathers tend to be more present in their children's lives. And even according to Dr. Lloyd, your study, close to 60% of Black fathers live with their children. So why do you, this question is for everyone, Matt's celebrating there. Why do you think these narratives of these false narratives of African-American fathers still exist? And what can we do to combat them?
I think it exists for a number of reasons. I mean, I would say one, systemic. I mean, without deadbeat dads or the notion of the deadbeat dad, you probably wouldn't, you'd have some lawyers that would be out of work. You'd have some judges that would be out of work. Private prisons won't make any money. So, there continues to be this need for the levels of manipulation and control from the oppressors and the opposition. So, like in the minds of the opposition, they have to continue to create this narrative, which is an exaggerated one, but that it has to be highlighted. We have to fight that and combat that by just continue to celebrate and highlight our Black fathers out here, and let's make it cool. Let's make it hip. I was amazed that when we had our Father's Day celebration, when the dads came out, it was the coolest thing on the planet. And I thought I was the coolest dad on the planet, but it was some cool dads that showed up, and it was very, very attractive. And I think that that's something that it needs to continue to be highlighted. And I mean, there's I can go on and on and on, but I think that it's a combination of that. There's a combination of, because of the family structure being broken. You may have some angry mothers out there that are just not really happy with the way things are going. Daddy ain't putting no food on the table. Daddy's not paying his child support. Oh, he's a deadbeat, and he's this, he's that, he's that. And so that has to be fixed, and I think that's something that, on every level, we really have to really heal. We really have to heal. And I don't necessarily have the answer for what it's going to take to completely heal, but I'm going to start right here in this house. And in this house, this is a top-notch dad right here. And I think, my daughters would probably agree. But I'm going to start right here in this house. And my daughters are now able to see what a good dad looks like, what a good dad acts like, what a good dad is supposed to do, what a good dad struggles with, the things that I struggle with. And they can identify what that looks like. So that way, when it's their turn to get married and have children, they'll kind of know, and so that's what I hope for. That's what I strive for. But I'm going to continue to be that example. And I'm going to start there, and I'm going to stop there.
I would just add that this country has a contentious relationship with African-American men, and we have to control our narrative. I was raised by a fantastic Black man. My daughters were raised by an amazing Black man. And so we have to celebrate them, and we have to tell our own story. Let's not let anybody tell our story. There are some men that could do better. There are some mothers that could do better, but that's in every community. Black men are hunted. They're targeted to be feared. They're murdered in the streets by people who we're paying to protect us. So let's not fall prey to that. Let's do some affirmative conditioning and lift up the Black men that are doing it. And girl dads, you can go a long way in helping women with self-esteem by being a positive role model, showing them how to treat a woman, showing them how to love a woman, and really being the backbone of our family. But we don't have to buy into that. There are a lot of things they say about Black women too that just aren't true. I am bright, I'm not angry. And when I express my displeasure with you, it is not out of anger. It is because I know what I'm talking about.
Right.
Yeah, I think we also need to kind of get rid of the there's a being present and there's a financial piece. And I think in the dominant society, the finances tend to drive, whether or not you're present or deadbeat. And I think there are a multitude of examples that I've seen in my work in Anacostia, my own family, where fathers who might not necessarily have the financial ability to contribute in ways that people expect them to are still very much present. And it's not just the father, right? It's that entire family that's behind the father, that mother, that father, those grandparents, right? So that paternal family is very much there in many, many cases, and that tends not to get recognized. And, and when you don't have that financial piece too, therein lies the deadbeat dad. Or you have, men who are incarcerated, who still are very much involved in children's lives, and in fact have time to really sit and think, if you look at the research and what it showed, right, about their role as fathers, why they have time to sit and really be reflective, and kind of building on that and bringing them back in a way that's not where they're not penalized. Our child support system is horrible. What sense does it make to take away someone's license, for example, if they're trying to find work? Like, you're just hindering them and tying them. And so, I often go back to policy because I think policies are really important. There's, there's what we need to be doing internally, but there are also a lot of external systems that are not supporting us and that are putting forth these narratives that we know, right, from our own experiences are not very accurate. And so, I think we just don't need to be getting caught up in those labels, and really recognizing what's happening. And the way that happens in this society is really, you got to write it. And we're an oral people. We need to be doing better at documenting and writing our history, and sharing those lessons, to social media is big now, right? And so I think we have an opportunity to kind of change narratives in that respect too. So we have work to do. And I think we have to be careful about, again, because I feel like I fall prey to this sometimes too. The angry Black woman, the welfare queen, the deadbeat dad. And when you really sit down and you look at the research and you look at the numbers, it's so not that. And so we have to tell those stories and be very intentional and deliberate about that.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you all so much. And I think, as each of you touched on, it's on us to kind of own our stories and our narratives and to tell more of the truth of our story and the truth of our culture. And so I think that's definitely one of the many charges I think we have leaving this conversation tonight. And in the interest of time, we do have to forego our audience question, but there were a couple of great ones in there, and we will leave information and resources on how to stay connected with our panelists. So your questions will not be lost. We'll make sure you can stay connected. But just to kind of wrap our discussion for tonight, we've talked a lot about what studies have shown and kind of how things have been for family formation. But I'd like for us to end by just taking a look at the future. So if each of you could share just what is your hope for marriages and families in our community, and how would you encourage someone who's interested in supporting these efforts? And anyone can jump in.
Ladies first.
That's a big question. I know there was a question in the chat just around, kind of mental health and thinking about mental health. And to me, that's, a big elephant in the room when we think about marriage, is that you have to be sound in yourself, right? And before you're really partnering with anybody else and expect to do that well. And we have so, it's trauma. But there's also beauty in that too. And I hate to use the word resilience. I'm bothered by it on many different levels, which are too, no time to go into that now. But we are we're here after a whole lot of stuff. And I think part of that is our spirituality. And I'm not talking religion, I'm talking spiritual people. And that's carried us through a lot of different things. And I think that could be our pathway to kind of getting ourselves right on the mental health tip too. And so I think there's, my hope is that we get healthy and that we get healthy mentally, so that we can engage in partnerships and parenting and relationships, whether it be marriage, whether it be, female to female relationships and female to male and parent to child. Like there's a lot of work to be done around relationships, and that requires a healthiness mentally that, for many reasons, I think we don't have, but are fully capable of, given what we've gone through. It's amazing sometimes that we're still here. So we got a lot to draw on. And I think we have to do better in that area. So that's my hope, is for, kind of strong mental capacity.
And I just hope marriage is such a personal decision, and and because it's such a vested relationship, you have to be committed to it. But I just hope that everyone would think about their legacy. 50 years from now, when you're not here, what do you want to leave behind? What do you want to instill in your children? What do you want your future generations to look like? My father talked about progressive generations, and he said, I want you to do something I don't even understand and that I've never heard of. You're supposed to do better than I am. And so really just, we're special people, and we need to celebrate that. And we need to challenge ourselves and challenge each other. So really think about your bloodline, your legacy, and how you want to spend your time here on earth, and what you want that to look like when you're not around to share it anymore.
Yeah, I think my hope for marriage, understanding that it's not a perfect world we're living in. And sometimes marriages can be more of a social obligation than the actual honoring of a union that is being built. I think that, I would just hope for people to really, go through the process of truly understanding what their connections are all about, whether that leads to marriage, whether that leads to long-time friendship or whatever, but do not play with marriage. When you go before you're on that altar and you make these vows, stick to that, because those are the very same things that people end up getting divorced over anyway. And so I think that marriage is something that we definitely should not play with it. Don't do it just out of a social obligation, but, just be present with it and go through the process. If you have to see a counselor or a pastor or somebody, go through that, but don't play around with it. It's my hope to see, everybody in the community connected and a part of some union. Although I know that's, it may be a little different because the numbers, it's not dead even. So we do the best that we can. I just pray that, we all can just love each other, be respectful, and be positive towards one another, whether we're married to each other or not. But I think that we should definitely value marriages, value it so much so that, we're not going to taint it. Marriage should be a lifelong thing. I'm sorry, I don't think that there should be such thing as divorce, because you're making that commitment. That's a lifelong commitment. So I just hope that, we all can be committed and stay committed. Mic drop.
Mic drop. That's the perfect way to end this dynamic discussion. I want to thank you, panelists, again. And if you in the chat can help me thank them for offering their time and their insight on this very, very important discussion that won't end here. It won't end tonight. But I'm really encouraged by what I've heard tonight, and I'm appreciative of the work again that the three of you are doing to help chip away at some of these challenges. We have a long way to go, as we've heard tonight, but there's hope. And with our panelists tonight and with our collective community, we can work together to help build stronger families. So thank you all again. And before I hand it back over to Hannah, I just want to remind everyone that now is the last chance to enter the giveaway. So be sure to drop the hashtag in the chat. And Hannah, I will hand it over to you. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Joya, for leading us through tonight's conversation. I think Cynthia said it so well in talking about progressive generations. That's exactly what Jeremiah 29:6 is talking about. Giving, finding wives, giving your children in marriage so that they can have children. That's progressive generations, and that's what we want to see in our community. So thank you for helping us think more about this topic, Joya, and thank you for leading us tonight. Fam, please show Joya some love. She did a wonderful job moderating this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. And fam, thank you for bearing with us. We're going to, I have a few resources I want to share with you before we get out of here tonight, because I want everyone to be encouraged. And as we not only pray about this topic of family formation, but we also think about it more deeply. And so for that, we need resources. We need the work of people like Dr. Lloyd and everything that she's done with her recent research study just released earlier this year, family economic and geographic characteristics of Black families. This is an entire research study on Black families throughout the country, and the team at Child Trends did a wonderful job of putting together demographic research as well as policy recommendations to help support Black families. So please, if you're interested, particularly more in the policy end of this, definitely check that out. 17 Blocks is a film documenting the life of a single Black family in Southeast DC from 1999 to about 2009. It is raw, it's real, but it's also really instructive on the realities of life as a child and as a family here in Southeast. And so please take some time to watch that if you can. You can find it on Paramount streaming service. Some websites for you to check out: care net.org leverages their 40 years of experience in providing resources to the church to help equip them in advocating for the unborn. Families First DC is an effort to support families. It's the district's effort to support families through neighborhood-based family resource centers. More information on that program can be found at cfsa.dc.gov. And that Families Valued is a policy initiative from the Center for Public Justice here in DC, which develops and advocates for family supporting policies like paid family leave. Like Dr. Lloyd said several times, the policies are so important. And, having paid family leave is critical to be able to support a family when you have to go out for whatever reason. And so DC is fortunate that we do have it here in the city, but I don't think Maryland or Virginia does as of yet. And so we need to be able to advocate for those kinds of policies. More information on their work can be found at familiesvalued.org. And if you're looking for ways to get involved, please volunteer at Martha's Table. It's a wonderful organization doing lots of great things. Their Anacostia Family Success Center is hosting a Get Ready for School giveaway on July 31st. More information and on volunteer opportunities can be found online on their website at marthastable.org. Now, for the winner of tonight's signed copy of Berry Farm, Hillsdale, and Anacostia, an historic African-American community by Alcini Amos. All right. Thank you, everyone, for entering using that hashtag. Let's see who won. All right. We have to run it again. So let's see who's going to win this tonight. Wonderful, Don COVID. We know how to get in contact with you. So thank you so much, Sister Deaconess. We will make sure that you get a copy of this book to read all about all of the history of our community. That brings us to the end of tonight's discussion. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations on Blessing the Block. Please join us next time as I moderate session 5. Seek the welfare of the city. We'll be discussing major issues that affect quality of life here in Southeast Washington, D.C. Thanks to Anacostia River Church for hosting this conversation and for your desire to marry and have children in this community. Thank you to our panelists, Dr. Chrishana Lloyd, Matt Miller, and Cynthia Moreland. Thank you to Pastor Babatunde Oluwesi and tonight's moderator, Joya Matthews. Thanks as always to our super producer, Astrid Hacker, and production assistant, Christian Coven. On behalf of Anacostia River Church, where I get to serve as Deaconess of Community Development, my name is Hannah Baker. Let's bless the block together, fam. Good night.